Let's talk about an element that on the surface sounds almost too good to be true. It promises to be a safer, cleaner, and way more abundant source of nuclear power. So, why aren't we using it? Well, it turns out this wonder fuel has a bit of a dark side. We're talking about thorium.
I mean, just look at the sales pitch. You hear that thorium is safer, it creates way less toxic waste, and it's way more common than the uranium that's powering all of our reactors today. It really does sound like the perfect nuclear fuel.
And this isn't some newfangled idea. Scientists have been kicking this around for decades, looking at thorium as a serious alternative to uranium.
Which, of course, brings us to the million-dollar question. If it's so great, why on earth aren't our cities already being powered by thorium reactors? What's the catch?
Well, the answer is complicated. It pulls back the curtain on two totally different kinds of danger. One is a massive global security risk, and the other is a very direct, very personal threat to human health.
Okay, so let's dive into that. But first, let's start with the good stuff. Why has thorium had so much excitement around it for so long? What's the big promise here?
The advantages really are compelling. For starters, there's just a ton of it. We're talking 3 to 4 times more thorium in the Earth's crust than uranium. And second, and this is a big one, it could help us solve the nuclear waste problem. Thorium reactors produce far less of that really dangerous, long-lasting radioactive gunk that we have such a hard time storing safely.
So how does this actually work? How do you get from a simple piece of rock all the way to a full-blown nuclear reaction?
It's kind of like a little bit of nuclear alchemy, right? You start with the most common version, thorium-232. Now, on its own, it can't actually start a chain reaction. But if you hit it with a neutron, it turns into thorium-233. That stuff is unstable, so it quickly decays into something called protactinium-233. Then, after one more decay, it finally becomes uranium-233. And that is the fissile material. That's the stuff that can actually power a reactor.
Now check out how some of these advanced reactor designs, like this molten salt reactor, are meant to work. See that little box labeled chemical processing plant? It's designed to constantly be pulling materials out of the reactor core while it's running. And that seemingly simple feature is what opens the door to our first huge risk.
And that brings us to our first major problem, a potential loophole that could be exploited for nuclear proliferation. Remember that middleman element, protactinium-233? It has a 27-day half-life. That means it takes 27 days for half of it to decay into the uranium-233 fuel. And that 27-day period, well, that creates a critical window of opportunity. Someone could, in theory, use that chemical processing plant to pull out the protactinium before it has a chance to turn into uranium inside the reactor. This graph here shows you exactly how that would play out. The green line, that's the protactinium-233. It starts high and then decays over time. And the blue line, that's the weapons-usable uranium-233, which grows as the protoactinium disappears. So if you had bad intentions, the game is simple. Siphon off the material when the green line is high, and then just wait for it to turn into the blue line's material somewhere else, far outside the secure facility.
So why is this such a huge deal? Well, because uranium-233 isn't just any old reactor fuel. The International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, classifies it as a special fissionable material, and that's the official serious term for stuff that can be used to make a nuclear bomb.
And when it comes to this stuff, quantity is everything. The IAEA has a special name for it, a significant quantity. For uranium-233, that number is just 8 kilograms. That's the threshold where international inspectors say they can't rule out the possibility of it being used to build a bomb. And this really puts the mission of those international inspectors into perspective. Their entire job, their core mission, is to detect the diversion of these materials, and to do it quickly. But that 27-day decay window makes timely detection incredibly difficult.
And here's why it's so hard. Think of this material as having a unique radioactive fingerprint. These graphs show that fingerprint at 2 different points in time. On the left, at 30 days, you can see the print is pretty sharp, pretty clear. But look at the right. At 100 days, the details have all faded and changed as the material has decayed. For the inspectors, it's a literal race against the clock to get a clear print before the evidence basically disappears.
But the risk of nuclear proliferation isn't the only problem here. Let's pivot now from a huge global security threat to something much more personal, the hidden health risks of working with thorium itself.
And just to be super clear, we are talking about 2 completely separate problems.
One is about stopping bad actors from getting their hands on nuclear material. That's a global security threat. The other is about protecting the health and safety of the individual people who actually have to handle and work with this element.
See, thorium is a radioactive heavy metal, but its real danger isn't just being near it. The main risk is to workers who might accidentally breathe in thorium dust. Because once it gets inside your lungs, it's a whole different ballgame. It emits these tiny but incredibly powerful alpha particles. They don't travel far, but they just relentlessly hammer the cells right next to them, causing very serious damage over time.
And this risk isn't just theoretical. It's very, very real. A major study of thorium workers found some really startling cancer rates. This table uses a metric called SMR, which compares their death rate to the general population. A score of 1 is normal. As you can see, the lung cancer risk is 44% higher. But look at pancreatic cancer. For workers exposed to the dust for over a year, their risk was more than 4 times higher than average. Just staggering.
Based on this kind of powerful evidence, the official classification from the U.S. National Toxicology Program is blunt and to the point. Thorium dioxide is listed with no ambiguity at all as known to be a human carcinogen.
So, this brings us right back to that central dilemma. On one hand, you have this incredible promise of a clean, abundant fuel, and on the other, you have these very serious, well-documented dangers.
So what's the path forward? Well, it's pretty clear that just building a better mousetrap, a better reactor, isn't enough. Solving the thorium problem really needs a three-pronged attack. We need stronger international policies to close those security loopholes. We need better materials science to design reactors that are inherently safer. And we absolutely need uncompromising health standards to protect every single worker who comes near this stuff.
Which leaves us with the ultimate question. Thorium holds the promise of a genuine revolution in energy, but it comes at these profound risks both to our global security and to our personal health. The challenge, really, is whether we can innovate our way past these dangers or if this so-called wonder fuel's promise will always be overshadowed by its peril.